My story starts in a family with parents that loved me, supported me, cared about me, and were conscientious with their parenting. Many people I know would be grateful to be able to say that, and I most certainly am grateful. And, as in all families, there was a dark side. My parents were rigid, unbending, authoritarian, and very harsh with discipline. There was a demand for absolute compliance. I learned it immediately as a young kid to survive. I was supported as long as I was being good. The code word for our family was responsibility. Most everything was black and white, all nothing. I became a very compliant, high-achieving child and adolescent. Back in the late 60s and 70s, I was raised in a country church in Southern Oregon, full of beautiful, unassuming, good-hearted people. And that church happily reinforced all of those family themes. The theology and the culture of the church went along to strengthen this rigid, unbending demand for certain types of behavior: perfection, compliance, obedience, and responsibility. The church also happened to be pastored by someone who 3 years earlier had publicly confessed to having molested his foster daughter. How he did not end up in prison, I don't know. When I was 16, this pastor caught me alone 4 different times and kissed me on the lips. I was young, confused, uncomfortable, and unsettled. The whole thing, I didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't say anything about it for years. I knew the story of his foster daughter, and I knew no one would take my story seriously. Their loyalty was with him. This clear sexual violation was a gross trespass against my body, my soul, and my spirit. In my developing mind, it normalized this type of behavior, and it paved the way for sexual assault by clergy years later. A Bible college in Portland, Oregon called my name when I was in high school, and at almost 18 years old, I moved. When I was 19 years old, I started attending a church I absolutely fell in love with. I was single and in the last year of college, and the church quickly became the complete center of my life, my heart, my ministry, my social circle, everything. I gave the church my blood and my soul, and I believed in it passionately. Due to years of teaching in my adolescence, I saw the church leadership there as my covering. I was involved in multiple areas of leadership. It was a cool, happening type church in the 80s, but it was strongly patriarchal, conservative, and rigid at its core. The elders and the pastors there were the same unit of leadership. There were no checks and balances, no places to question, no recourse if you disagreed. They took pride in their church discipline theology, and it took place regularly and publicly. This all seemed normal and reasonable to me at the time. I happily gave that church everything. The second week I attended, I struck up a conversation with one of the pastors. I expressed my interest in the unique things the church was doing, and he invited me to make an appointment with him. We became friends. He took me under his wing, and over the next years, he became what I would call my second dad. He was 18 years older than me, married, several kids. I quickly realized he was a powerful personality. You did not want to cross him. He gave me his favor in the church and in my life. And he helped facilitate my desire to go overseas with our church in a full-time missions capacity. I didn't think anything was amiss for the first 5 years. In year 6, it became clear that he was making sexual advances. He sexually abused me for 9 months. Throughout those months, he told me that I couldn't get out of the relationship because he was unstable emotionally and would kill himself if I told anyone. This, of course, hooked all my codependent, rescuing, responsible Christian tendencies that I'd been developing since childhood. I was trapped. I made a very sad and very sick decision that I would rather my life and my future be destroyed than risk his suicide if I went to someone and asked for help. During this time, it also became very evident that my abuser was an alcoholic. During the sexual abuse, I was hoping beyond all hope that eventually the church leadership would understand what I didn't yet understand, that they would help me to find clarity and protect me from the abuser. I was programmed to take responsibility for what had happened between me and my abuser. It's what responsible people do. But a wiser part of me knew that I was deeply entrapped and was being manipulated. On the other hand, I was terrified I'd be completely blamed and held responsible. I knew the patriarchal, authoritarian system innately. After 9 months of entrapment in that abuse, I quit my job and went home to Southern Oregon to escape the abuse. Due to my ingrained sense of responsibility and my black and white religious worldview, I viewed the relationship as an emotional affair. Even though I knew that didn't add up. The confusion, I don't even know how to describe it. It was excruciating. 3 weeks after I moved, my abuser left Portland and finally told the elders what had happened through a letter in the mail. He wrote and told them that he had abused me, indeed, and that I was in over my head with the situation. He sent me a photocopy of the letter. Upon receipt of that letter, I immediately returned to Portland to face the elders and hoped for protection, for clarity, for help. One of my most vivid memories was waiting downstairs in the nursery of that church in a fetal position, shaking, nauseated, utterly terrified, getting ready to go in to meet with the elders. In that initial meeting, it was clear that because my abuser was not in town, I was to be the brunt and the focal point of their anger, their hurt, their outrage. I was it. Most of the elders told me how angry they were with me. One of them told me I was a threat to every married woman. They all agreed that I should move back to my parents' home in Southern Oregon. Now, my life, my work, my social circle, my future, my best friends, everything was in Portland. It was understood by everyone that if I were to go against this suggestion, it would be proof of my lack of repentance and proof of my rebellion. They wanted me gone. So this pastor, my abuser, and his wife and family could repair, that they could recover and be supported by the church. I was a convenient person to blame. I was convenient due to my gender, my marital status, age, my compliant personality. So I moved home. The expectation was that I would also give public confession of my sin in both of the two services, so as not to be put under formal church discipline. Okay, that's kind of how it worked. I was beyond desperate to let everyone know that I had never wanted this to happen. I knew it was going public, and I was not going to be protected, so I complied with their expectation. Packed my small car with everything I owned and moved back to my parents' home on my 26th birthday. In the months following, it's hard to describe the extent of my brokenness and hopelessness. My reputation, my identity, both had been completely shattered. I had no idea who I was anymore. I grieved the life that I had been forced to leave. I had lost my best friends, my whole social circle, and my future career plans. More significantly, I had lost my innocence my reputation, my very self. Panic attacks and suicidal depression plagued me for months. In the years that followed, I still had no idea what had happened to me. This was 1990, and nobody was talking about spiritual abuse. It took me 3 years to realize that I had been sexually abused. I read a prominent book during that time on the topic of sexual abuse, and it was a turning point. This was the beginning of healing. It outlined perfectly the grooming, the abuse, and the entrapment that I had experienced and that structured sexual abuse. Here's the thing. The understanding of spiritual abuse took me so much longer, and it was unspeakably more messy. The following 7 years consisted of fighting for physical and emotional survival, individual counseling, group counseling, and finally beginning to heal and then thrive. At that point, 7 years later, I gained the health, the strength, and the courage to return to talk to the elders about what had happened and its impact on me. I would say 25% of the impact of my abuse was the sexual abuse. I'm going to say that 75% of the impact of my abuse was the spiritual abuse by the elders. That was way more damaging and more long-term damaging. So I go back to the elders. I expected nothing from them. I needed nothing from them, which is good. I retained a small strand of hope that they would see the truth of the damage of what they'd done. I did not want it repeated with anyone else ever. I was gracious and kind, but very direct. Only one elder out of about 5 that had been there at the time of the abuse chose to hear and truly understand what had happened. Oh, how I wish that in the years following, someone could have helped me sort through what had just happened to me. I received counseling for the sexual abuse, but no one really understood and was able to name the damage I had been through with the church. No one. No one was able to reflect to me the damage done to me in my relationship with God, the utter confusion, the emotional deadness, the spiritual deadness, everything that followed me for years. In the last 26 years, I have married and become a mom. I went back to school. I became a mental health therapist. I've done the roller coaster of major faith shifts. I've gone to counseling. I've sorted out the catastrophic damage done to me mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and I've healed. In each of the areas that have been damaged or destroyed, goodness, grace, transformation have taken place. I now have the remarkable privilege, joyful privilege, sacred privilege of walking with those whose lives have been injured or broken at some point by spiritual abuse. May my small story and my restored happy life and being give hope, inspiration, and healing to those of you who've traveled the same path.